After 18 months of work, my dad destroyed my thesis laptop hours before submission, saying I didn't deserve a future. But I earned highest honors. My name is Elise. I'm 24 years old, and my father slammed my laptop against my skull 2 days before my PhD thesis deadline. I had been working on the thesis for 18 months. My mother laughed in the corner as blood streamed down my temples. Dad stood over me, his face distorted with anger. "What's your future?" "That's a joke," he spit. "You don't deserve a future. You're just a leech." I never anticipated my educational journey would end this way. If you're watching, I grew up in Millbrook, a little industrial town where the factory whistle regulated life better than any clock. Our humble 2-bedroom house located on the outskirts of town, its peeling paint a daily reminder of what my father termed having realistic priorities. My father, Victor Morgan, had worked at the steel mill for 27 years. His calloused hands and constant scowl were the consequence of what he proudly described as real work. In his opinion, education was a luxury for those who were too soft to work hard. Marion, Mom, worked part-time at the local cafe when she wasn't maintaining the house exactly as Dad desired. She learned early in their marriage that contradicting him resulted in days of quiet or heated confrontations. She gradually became his echo, confirming his beliefs in order to avoid becoming their target. She would occasionally join him in mocking my intellectual interests, her uneasy laughter serving as a screen against being the next target of his scorn. My older brother, Andrew, was the golden child. He dropped out of high school during his junior year to work alongside his father at the mill. "Now that is a real Morgan," Dad would say proudly at family gatherings, clasping Andrew's shoulder. "None of that book nonsense, just honest work." Andrew readily absorbed these lessons, mimicking Dad in both viewpoint and manner. By the age of 20, he had his own apartment and a stable paycheck, both of which my parents believed to be the pinnacles of success. Meanwhile, I quickly learned that I like learning. Words captivated me. Numbers had mysteries that I longed to uncover. Science projects in our kitchen would cause me to lose track of time until Dad stormed in and demanded that I stop wasting food on silliness. Mrs. Whitaker, my third-grade teacher, was the first to notice. "Elise has remarkable analytical skills," she informed my parents during a conference. They just attended because it was required. Dad glanced at the wall, and Mom nodded nicely, both forgetting her remarks before we arrived at the parking lot. By 5th grade, I had won the district spelling bee. The local newspaper published a little piece featuring my photograph. I was happy, clutching my certificate, as my classmates' parents took photos. Mine never appeared. "Had to work overtime," Dad claimed. I subsequently overheard him telling Andrew that it was silly to celebrate learning how to spell phrases that a normal person could simply look up. In 7th grade, my scientific project on water quality in local streams received state distinction. The principal personally called home to deliver the news. Mom said, "That is nice," in the same tone she used to acknowledge the weather forecast. When I asked if they would drive me to the state competition 2 hours away, Dad laughed. "We aren't wasting gas just so you may play scientist. This will not put food on the table." High school became my refuge. I joined every academic club I could find, staying after school until the last possible moment before leaving for home. My English teacher, Mr. Callahan, loaned me books from his own library. "Your mind is exceptional, Elise," he once told me. "Do not let anyone dim your light." Miss Rivera, my math instructor, remained late to assist me prepare for advanced placement examinations. "College will open doors you cannot even imagine," she urged. When I became valedictorian, the principal personally invited my parents to the event. They did not attend. Dad had planned a fishing excursion with Andrew. Mom claimed to have a migraine. I presented my speech in front of a throng of strangers, fighting back tears while other students went to hug their ecstatic parents afterwards. I stood alone until Mr. Callahan appeared with a little wrapped gift. It was a journal with the inscription, "Your journey has just begun, the world requires your voice." That night, I made a secret pledge to myself. I would be the first Morgan to attend college. Not just any college, but the greatest one that will accept me. Education would be my escape from the limited future my family anticipated for me. Each rejection of my accomplishments just strengthened my resolve. Each disdainful word strengthened the basis of my resolve. I applied for scholarships in secret, utilized school computers to complete applications because we didn't have internet at home, and set up a special email address that my parents would never discover. To avoid receiving mail at our residence, I got a teacher to serve as my primary contact. While my peers shared their college acceptance letters with supportive families, I kept mine hidden under a loose floorboard beneath my bed, bringing them out at night to reread by flashlight. My fingertips tracing the embossed institution logos like treasure maps to another life. As my family celebrated my graduation, Dad simply remarked, "So, you start at the mill next week, correct?" When I finally mustered the nerve to inform them of my full scholarship to State University, the silence lasted 10 agonizing seconds until Dad slammed his plate against the wall. "Do you think you are too good for honest work? Is it too wonderful for your family? Books and theories do not nourish people, Elise. Real work works." Mom just gazed at her lap, and Andrew smiled and said, "Always knew you were weird." That night, I packed what little I had, knowing the bridge I was crossing was on fire behind me. Despite the terror twisting in my stomach, each item I packed into my luggage seemed like recovering a piece of myself they'd never completely recognized. My first day of college orientation seemed like I had stepped onto another planet. Families helped unload cars loaded with dorm supplies, with mothers fussing over bed layouts and fathers assembling furniture. I came alone on a Greyhound bus, carrying one suitcase and a backpack containing everything I possessed. The scholarship covered tuition and basic room and board, but not anything additional, such as spending money, a laptop, or extra clothes and supplies. "Are your parents arriving later?" Leah, my roommate, inquired as her mother organized their closet space, and her father set up a little fridge he had purchased as a surprise. "They had to work," I told a lie. The first of many over the next 4 years. The truth was too complex and terrible to communicate to these strangers, whose parents embraced them goodbye with tears and pleased grins. The first semester was the most difficult transition. Without a laptop, I spent hours in the computer lab typing papers while other students worked comfortably from home. The financial aid office assisted me in obtaining a work-study employment in the cafeteria, but the hours were limited, and the income barely met basic needs. I got a second job waiting tables at a cafe near campus, working nights and weekends while attempting to maintain the GPA required for my scholarship. 3 weeks into October, my meticulously planned budget fell apart when I had strep throat. The doctor appointment and medication drained my modest cash. With nowhere else to go, I swallowed my pride and called home. Mom responded, her voice immediately guarded. "Is everything all right?" she inquired, implying, "Are you finally abandoning this college nonsense?" "I am a little short on money this month," I explained. "I got sick and had some medical bills. I was wondering if I could borrow $100 until my next paycheck." The hush lasted till Dad picked up the phone. "We already have money difficulties. Welcome to the real world, college lady. Maybe now you'll realize what actual responsibility feels like." He hung up without saying anything further. That night, I slept in my car for the first time, unable to pay for both my prescription and my share of the dorm expenses. Leah had family visiting, so I made excuses to stay with a buddy to avoid shame. I spent 2 weeks alternating between the back seat of my 15-year-old Honda and the 24-hour university library, showering in the gym before class. Nobody noticed. I became indistinguishable, just another exhausted student among thousands. By Thanksgiving, most students had gone home for the holiday. I took on extra shifts at the diner, earning double pay and huge tips from customers who felt sorry for the poor college girl working on a holiday. With those cash, I was able to get a small studio apartment off campus at a lower rate than the dorm. It was in a problematic area, but it was mine. Despite these challenges, I thrived academically. My lecturers recognized my hard ethic and intellectual interest. Dr. Patel, my introduction to psychology lecturer, was the first of many mentors who would help define my academic career. After I completed a report on the psychological effects of economic uncertainty on family dynamics, she invited me to stay after class. "This analysis shows remarkable insight," she told me. "Have you ever considered majoring in psychology?" That conversation paved the way for new opportunities. Psychology provided a framework for understanding my own experiences. As I studied family systems, attachment theory, and resilience characteristics, I noticed commonalities in my own childhood. Knowledge became more than just an escape. It was also a source of healing. By sophomore year, I'd established a rigorous but sustainable schedule that included morning classes, afternoon library study sessions, evening work shifts, and late-night homework. I survived on ramen noodles, free campus event food, and the rare lunch bought for me by a professor during academic discussions. To save money on my apartment utility bills, I learned to look for buildings with the finest heating in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. Junior year offered a research assistant employment that paid more than my previous service jobs. Professor Whitmore chose me above dozens of applications based on my academic performance. Your perspective on socioeconomic factors and family psychology is unusually nuanced, he told me. Most pupils my age had merely a theoretical comprehension of these topics, if only he knew how intimately I understood them. Each theory I examined shed light on another facet of my family's dynamics. Each academic paper I read helped me put words to experiences I had only felt before. By senior year, I discovered my academic passion, investigating how family settings influence scholastic attainment and psychological development. The irony was not lost on me that my own family had become my most important research. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. Several professors pushed me to apply to graduate programs and provided wonderful recommendations. I felt vindicated when I received my graduate school acceptance letter, which included a teaching assistantship that would cover the majority of my fees. I had proven myself despite all odds. In a moment of optimism, I called home to share the news. Mom responded, sounding older than I remember. I got accepted into the graduate program at State, I added, attempting to keep the pride out of my voice. Full funding and a teaching position. Oh, she stopped. Okay, more school then. Elise, when do you plan to obtain a real job? Mom, this is a legitimate job. I'll be teaching and conducting research. Dad must have been listening on the extension because his voice abruptly cut in. So, the perpetual learner continues to postpone maturing. Some of us have had genuine jobs since we were 16, but I think that is beneath the professor wannabe. I ended the call shortly after, reminding myself of why I had limited communication with them in the first place. Nonetheless, some infantile part of me yearned for approval, recognition that what I had done was worthwhile. That hope now appeared as unrealistic as expecting water from a stone. With graduate school ahead, I needed to find affordable apartments close to university. However, the teaching stipend would barely cover the necessities. After calculating expenditures, I made a difficult decision. I'd rent a small flat in my hometown, 20 minutes from university. The rent was much lower than university area apartments, and I could make the drive. I told myself it was all about money, but maybe a part of me still craved the family connection I'd never had. Graduate school enhanced every aspect of academic life. The homework became more difficult, the expectations increased, and the rivalry grew fiercer. However, for the first time, I felt completely in my element. My college struggles had prepared me for this strain in ways that my more wealthy classmates were only starting to appreciate. My research narrowed down on family psychology, specifically the effect of parental attitudes toward education on children's academic achievement and self-esteem. Every study article I produced revolved around this issue, exploring it from various theoretical perspectives. My lecturers observed the exceptional depth of my analysis. Most students your age approach these topics theoretically, Dr. Halverson said about one of my articles. Your work shows a remarkably nuanced understanding of the lived experience. If only she understood how personal this research was to me. Every statistical correlation I examined mirrored events from my own childhood. Every case study contained echoes of my own experience. I was both the researcher and the subject, but I kept this fact disguised under academic terminology and scientific rigor. 3 months into the program, my meticulously managed budget crumbled when my automobile required substantial repairs. The teaching salary barely covered rent, utilities, and food, leaving nothing for emergencies. After exhausting all other possibilities, I grudgingly contacted my parents. I just need a place to stay for a month or two while I save for a new car, I said, hating the vulnerability in my voice. I can pay some rent, help with chores, and I will be at the university most days anyway. To my amazement, they agreed without much debate. Dad grumbled about coming back with your tail between your legs, but Mom appeared almost delighted to have me back home. Maybe, I stupidly assumed, time had eased their attitudes. Maybe my dedication may finally gain their appreciation. The first week went remarkably smoothly. I put up a modest workspace in my previous bedroom, which is currently primarily used for storage. I developed a practice of leaving early for university and returning late, limiting our connection time. Mom would periodically leave plates of food in the fridge with my name on them. Dad kept his opinion to a few muttered remarks about career students, but nothing directly aggressive. This tenuous peace enabled me to concentrate on drafting my thesis idea. My past study had naturally led me to this topic. Educational resilience in first-generation college students, family dynamics, and psychological coping mechanisms. My thesis committee warmly accepted it, citing its potential benefits to better understanding impediments to higher education access. Dr. Halverson consented to be my principal consultant, providing valuable assistance and support as I established my study technique. The initial research phase proceeded nicely. I conducted literature reviews, created survey items, and received Institutional Review Board approval for human subjects research. I organized interviews with 21st-generation college students, carefully selecting individuals whose experiences would provide different perspectives on the topic I was researching. Each interview lasted 2 to 3 hours and provided valuable qualitative data that both verified and complicated my initial notion. As the workload increased, so did tensions at home. What started as subtle jabs turned into daily commentary on my obsession with schooling and concerns about when I'd join the real world. Dad was especially upset with my laptop, which represented everything he loathed about intellectual pursuits. "Staring at that screen all day will rot your brain," he would say, purposefully turning on the television at full power while I was working. "People who type for a living are just pretending to work," Mom repeated her usual pattern of passive reinforcement. "Your father just wants what is best for you," she would reply in response to particularly harsh statements. Perhaps a comfortable office job would be preferable to all this stress. Simpler. Simpler. As if I desired simplicity. As if I hadn't spent my entire life fighting for a simple escape. My brother Andrew began visiting more frequently. When I was immersed in thought, he would burst into my room without knocking, ask irrelevant questions, or remind me of family obligations I had allegedly neglected. Each interruption sapped vital time and mental energy as I battled to regain my concentration. Sleep became a luxury that I could rarely afford. I started working through the evenings when the house was quiet, getting a few hours of sleep in the early morning before traveling to university. The physical and emotional weariness mounted, but my determination only became greater. Every impediment they erected spurred my determination to complete my thesis, to demonstrate once and for all that their restricted perception of my worth was incorrect. 6 weeks before the submission deadline, Dr. Halverson evaluated my paper and provided important criticism that required significant adjustments. "Your analysis is solid," she said, "but you should rearrange your conclusions to better meet the theoretical framework. These links are inherent in your work, but they should be explicit." This setback was accompanied by technological troubles that corrupted some of my backup data. I missed several days of work, forcing me to piece together difficult statistical analyses from memory and scattered notes. The pressure increased as the deadline approached, with seemingly insurmountable problems. Every day, I felt the thesis slip further from completion. The night I overheard my parents discussing me in the kitchen was the tipping point. I came downstairs for coffee, hoping to remain up for another all-night writing session. Their voices came from around the corner. "She thinks she is so smart with all those books and big words," my dad said. "What use is a fancy degree if you still live with your parents at 24? At the age of 19, Andrew acquired his own place. "I worry about her," Mom said, not in defense but in agreement. "All this schooling, and for what? No husband, no children, just papers that no one will ever read." "Waste of time and money," Dad concluded. "Should have gone to work after high school like a normal person." I retired quietly to my chamber, their words searing like venom in my chest. I retired quietly to my chamber, their words searing like venom in my chest. The weight of them pressed down on me. I could almost feel each sentence embed itself further in my head. With newfound motivation, I worked for 20 hours straight, powered by coffee and wrath. The hours merged into one another, and the world beyond my screen vanished. My fingers glided across the keyboard with mechanical accuracy. By the time daylight broke, I had rebuilt the lost analysis and applied the majority of Dr. Halverson's recommended changes. My thesis was 90% complete. Only the final pieces remained, with 48 hours to submission. That morning, Dad increased his interference. He barged into my room every 30 minutes, making minor demands or comments. Each encroachment was like a hammer breaking glass, shattering my concentration. It took me longer and longer to collect my thoughts again. Mom joined in, but more subtly. She insisted on taking breaks to eat meals I didn't desire, or to help with domestic activities that couldn't wait. "Your thesis will still be there tomorrow," she responded dismissively when I mentioned the deadline. "Family comes first." The last 24 hours were a struggle of wills. I had retreated to the dining room table, which was the only place with enough space for my reference materials. My notes, research articles, and drafts were carefully organized. Dad purposely turned on the television in the next living room and switched to a sports station at full blast. The sound echoed through the walls. When I requested him to lower it, he went on a diatribe about ungrateful children. My house. My rules. I labored all night, finishing the last adjustments as sunlight began to shine through the curtains. Only formatting and one final proofread remained. The submission deadline was 12 o'clock. I felt fatigued, yet triumphant. I had surmounted every impediment they had set in my way. The thesis was excellent. It was truly fascinating work, with significant contributions to my field. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel a flicker of pride. When Dad walked into the dining room, coffee mug in hand, everything changed forever. The morning of my thesis submission day began with deceiving tranquility. Birds chirped outside my window. Sunlight seeped through the poor blinds, creating faint patterns on the crowded floor. I'd been awake for over 36 hours straight, fueled by black coffee and pure willpower. My eyes burned from gazing at the screen, but a sense of satisfaction overcame the tiredness. Just a few more hours, I reminded myself. With just a few more hours and 18 months of work, my thesis would be complete. The home was peaceful. Too quiet. I tiptoed into the kitchen for my 5th coffee refill. The microwave's digital clock illuminated at 7:06 a.m. There were less than 5 hours left until the noon deadline. I only needed to finish the final proofread, arrange the references to academic standards, and create the submission package. If nothing goes wrong, I'll finish with plenty of time left over. My workspace was arranged on the dining room table. I had moved there the previous evening after Dad took over the living room for a loud basketball game. My references and notes were carefully arranged into piles, each representing a portion of my thesis. My laptop, an old model that I had bought second-hand with my teaching stipend, hummed steadily as it processed the enormous document. The first sign of problems occurred about 7:30 a.m. when Dad emerged from his bedroom. On his days off, he usually slept in until about 8 a.m. His early look immediately threw off alarms in my thoughts. He paused in the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowed as he examined my workspace. "Still playing student, I see," he said, his voice bearing that old dismissive tone. "Normal people are heading to work right about now." I bit back the response that had formed instantaneously in my head. "Just a few more hours," I reminded myself. "Do not engage. Don't give him an excuse." "Good morning, Dad," I responded, keeping my tone calm. "I'll be done shortly. My submission is due by noon." He grunted and moved to the coffee maker. Submission. A fancy name for homework. When I was your age, I already had a family. The words hung in the air like an outdated accusation. I'd heard them hundreds of times before. Today they scarcely registered. I went back to my screen. Mom appeared next, with her hair still in curlers. She pursed her lips as she studied the dining room table. "All these papers everywhere," she said. "We need to set the table for breakfast." "I just need a few more hours," I explained, trying not to sound desperate. "It's due today. It represents the conclusion of 2 years of study." "Work?" Dad sneered in the kitchen. "Typing is not working. Try hauling steel beams in 100-degree heat. That's work." Mom placed a hand on my shoulder. To anyone else, it may have been supportive, but I noticed the subtle pressure in her fingertips. "Surely you may take a quick break for family breakfast. We hardly see you anymore." The irony of this statement was nearly hilarious. For weeks they had complained about my presence, about my laptop, about my documents cluttering their area. Now, family togetherness was a priority, and it happened to be right when my deadline was approaching. "I really cannot stop right now," I stated firmly. "The formatting is extremely precise, and I need to concentrate." Dad appeared at the doorway, holding a coffee mug hard. "Your mom asked you to clear the table for breakfast. This was not a request." His speech had a deadly edge that I recognized from boyhood. That tone was always used before punishments and intense anger. Still, I could not give. Not today. Not with everything at stake. "I will eat later," I offered as a compromise. "You and Mom can use the kitchen counter. I just need to finish this." His face clouded. "Ungrateful. That is what schooling does. It makes children believe they are too good for family meals. Too vital to respect the house rules." Mom used her normal peacekeeping line. "Victor, please let her finish her school project. She can join us later." However, her statements lacked conviction. We all knew it. Dad slapped his mug down, spilling coffee over the rim. "Project. She is 24 years old and spends her time on school assignments, while actual grown-ups work." I tried to ignore his voice by focused solely on my screen. "Just keep working. Do not engage." Every minute of distraction was a minute lost, and the deadline was fixed. Andrew showed up unannounced at 9:30. His visits became disturbingly frequent during my thesis completion phase, always coinciding with periods of intense concentration. It was as if he had an internal radar that detected when I was in the midst of anything vital. The front door opened without a single knock. His booming voice filled the house immediately, breaking the fragile bubble of concentration I had been attempting to preserve. "Have a family breakfast." "Mom told me you were cooking, Dad," he said, dropping his keys loudly onto the counter so the sound echoed. He walked toward the dining room, peeking over my shoulder without asking. His gaze flickered to the TV. "Are you still writing that paper? I thought you'd be done by now." "Thesis," I corrected reflexively, my gaze fixed on the text. "And yes, I am finishing it today." Andrew laughed briefly and dismissively. "Thesis, paper, homework, whatever, same thing, right?" He did not wait for a response. "Hey, did I tell you about my promotion at the mill? He is currently the supervisor. Full benefits, pension. The works." Dad's face lit up instantaneously, a reaction I'd never seen in response to any of my accomplishments. "That's my boy," he declared, beaming with pride. "This is real job, real rewards. Enough of this degree nonsense that never ends." The contrast was nearly physically excruciating. My chest tightened, like if my father's words were pressing down on it. I had to physically stop myself from reacting by biting down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I took a long breath, focusing my concentration back on my citations. I would not be baited. I would not give them the satisfaction of knowing their remarks were reaching me. The next 2 hours were a flurry of planned sabotage. Passive-aggressive comments, unnecessary noises, and thinly veiled hatred. Mom came into the dining room repeatedly, dusting surfaces that did not require cleaning. Dad turned up the television volume in the living room every 15 minutes until I could hear the commentators as if they were standing next to me. Andrew made loud phone conversations directly behind my chair, pacing just enough to brush against my workspace each time he moved by. By 11:30 my nerves had frayed to the breaking point, but the finish line was within sight. The thesis was formatted properly, citations are verified, abstractly polished, everything was ready. All that left was a final save and submission via the university site. I truly intended to make it. Despite everything. Despite them. That is when the internet connection failed. I looked at the error notice with astonishment. No link is available. I checked my phone. There is no service there either. With growing dread, I strolled into the living room, where Dad was sitting in front of the television, his streaming service running flawlessly, high-definition picture included. "The internet is out in the dining room," I remarked, straining to maintain my voice. "I need to submit my thesis in the next 30 minutes. Can you check the router?" He kept his gaze fixed on the television. "Internet's working fine for me." "But it's not working on my laptop or phone," I said, dread creeping into my voice. "Please, this is vital. I need to submit by noon." He turned slowly, his face unreadable. Funny how these emergencies always revolve around your schoolwork. Never seem to have technical difficulties when it comes to assisting your mother with tasks. The revelation came with chilling clarity. "Have you done anything to the internet?" A faint, contented smile pulled on the corner of his lips. My house. My internet. Perhaps I turned on parental restrictions. Perhaps the dining area is suddenly a computer-free zone. Blood raced to my face. My voice shook from the effort of restraint. "I need to submit my thesis. This is my future, Dad." He laughed, and the sound was entirely devoid of humor. "What's your future? That is a joke." He stood up and loomed over me. "What future does unending schooling provide? Andrew has a house, a promotion, and a normal life. What have you got? A stack of papers that no one will read, plus student debt." Mom arrived in the doorway, drawn by the rising noises. Instead of intervening, she remained calmly, her presence an implicit confirmation of his actions. "I need to get this submitted," I said as I moved for the router. "I'll reset the connection myself." His hand shot out and bruised my arm. "You don't touch anything in my house without permission." "Let go of me," I muttered, pulling my arm away. "This is insane. I only need internet access for 5 minutes." "Your work?" He scoffed. "Do you mean your excuse for avoiding real responsibility? Your lofty education, which leads you to believe you are superior to us?" Something inside of me cracked. "This was never about my education. This has always been about your insecurities. You're threatened because I selected a different path." His expression turned into rage. You ungrateful little. I cut him off. Number, I am not ungrateful. I'm ambitious. I am determined. And I will not allow you to damage my future because you do not comprehend it. I turned and headed into the dining room to get my laptop. If I had to drive to campus, I would. The 30-minute journey would probably make me late, but I had to try. I heard him follow, his big footsteps causing the floor to quiver. I reached for my laptop as soon as he entered. You think you're so much smarter than everyone, he continued, speaking dangerously quietly. So much better than your family because of your precious education. I did not respond. I was completely concentrated on obtaining my materials as rapidly as possible. Time was running out. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he said. I continued packing. I said, look at me. I turned, hugging my laptop against my chest like a shield. I need to go. We can discuss this later. There is nothing to talk about, he murmured, moving closer. You must learn respect. You need to understand your place. My place is not here, I said, the truth echoing through my own ears. It never was. Something changed in his gaze, a frightening spark. Later, I'd recognize it as the moment when his desire for control took precedence over everything else. In that moment, he was no longer my father, but rather a man who could not endure to be challenged. Your future, he said, his voice oddly calm. That is a joke. His hand shot out at my laptop. For a brief time I imagined he might simply take it away, hide it until the deadline passed, a petty punishment. But I couldn't have predicted what happened next. He yanked the laptop from my grasp with the force of decades of physical labor and ferocious wrath. Our gazes locked for just a fraction of a second. There was no pause in his voice, no moment of parental reconsideration, only hard, purposeful rage. The laptop then landed hard on the side of my head. The collision ripped through my skull like a bullet. Pain erupted instantly, white hot and excruciating. The device's corner struck just above my right temple, and I felt the skin tear open. Warm wetness started running down my face. The punch knocked me backward till my shoulders smacked the wall. My vision clouded and darkened at the edges. Through the haze, I saw my laptop fall to the floor, the screen separating from the keyboard with a horrible snap of plastic and electronics. 18 months of work vanished in an instant. You don't deserve a future, Dad said, hovering over me as I slid down the wall. You are just a leech. The most shocking sound came next. Laughter. My mom's laughter. She stood at the doorway, high and scared, and watched. Not intervening. I am not calling for assistance. There is no evidence of maternal protection. Instead of assaulting his daughter, her husband simply laughed, as if he had delivered a little inappropriate joke. Victor, she finally replied, still giggling. That's enough now. Enough. Blood was already dripping into my eye. My thesis, graduate degree and future were all in pieces on the floor. And for my mother, this was simply enough. Dad loomed over me, chest heaving, as if astonished by his own deeds but not at all sorry. Clean yourself up, he said finally, and clean up this mess too. He turned and went away. Mom followed him like a shadow. The kitchen was filled with the mundane noises of coffee being poured and the refrigerator door opening and closing, as if nothing unusual had occurred. As if he hadn't just crossed an indelible border. I stayed on the floor for several minutes, stunned and immobile. The anguish in my head pounded with every heartbeat. When I finally touched my temple, my fingers turned scarlet with blood. The incision was deep enough that I'd probably require stitches. More immediately troubling were the nausea and dizziness, which are clear indicators of a suspected concussion. With shaky hands, I collected the broken parts of my laptop. The screen was supported by a single wire from the keyboard. The case was split, with plastic parts spread like shrapnel on the floor. I tried to press the power button. Nothing. Not even a glimmer of life. The machine that supported my entire academic career has died. Panic cut through the ache. I needed those files. There had to be some way. I stumbled to the restroom, grasping the counter to keep myself stable. The mirror revealed an inch-long cut over my right temple. Blood was still flowing freely. My eye had already begun to swell, indicating a huge bruise before morning. I pressed a clean washcloth against the area and applied pressure. The bathroom light was really bright. When I moved my head too quickly, the room whirled. I should have gone to the ER, but the thesis deadline loomed greater than my physical well-being. Noon. Less than an hour remained. I returned to the dining room, a washcloth placed to my head. Andrew was now sitting at the table, going through his phone as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Dad really got you good," he said without looking up. Should have known better than to talk back. The casual way he recognized the assault, without condemnation, was nearly as unsettling as the crime itself. "I need to get my thesis files off this laptop," I replied, ignoring his comment. "Do you have a computer that I can use? I need to submit by noon." He laughed. "Are you still anxious about homework since Dad pushed you to next week? Your priorities are off, sis." "Please," I pleaded, hating the imploring tone in my voice. "This is my graduation thesis, everything I have worked for. I only need to access the files." He shrugged. "Sorry, I left my laptop at home. Besides, the stuff is toasted. There's no chance you'll get anything out of it." I knew he was correct. The destruction was devastating. Nonetheless, I had to try. With trembling hands, I gathered the broken pieces into my bag. Blood continued to flow through the washcloth, and there was no time to treat it properly. I needed to leave. Mom arrived at the doorway as I prepared to go. "Where do you think you are going?" she asked, as if I were a teen violating curfew rather than an ill adult. "Go to the hospital, and then to campus," I said without glancing at her. I couldn't stomach seeing the woman who had laughed while I was bleeding. "Your father is still upset," she explained, dropping her voice. "Maybe you should wait for him to settle down." I apologize for provoking him. The folly of her suggestion struck me as a second blow. Apologize? For what? For seeking education? Are you expecting basic human respect? For having my skull split open by my father? "Don't be dramatic, Elise," she groaned. "It was simply a small dispute that escalated. Family disagreements occur." "It wasn't a disagreement, Mom. This was an assault." Her expression stiffened. "Now you're simply acting ridiculous. Your father will never—" "He just did." I pointed to my wounded head. "Look at me. Check out what he did." She looked at my damage with chilly detachment. "You'll probably need a few stitches. I can drive you to urgent care after lunch." "After lunch?" The remarks left a bad taste in my mouth. As if my deadline, career, and future were not fading by the second. "I am leaving," I stated firmly, gathering my bags, "and I am not coming back." Dad's words resounded from the living room. "If you go out that door, do not bother returning back. Ungrateful children do not get second chances in this house." Mom's eyes implored and accused simultaneously. "I see what you've started. Just apologize, and this will all be over." "No more," I replied. "Goodbye, Mom." "You'll regret this," I heard her say. "When your fancy education leaves you alone with no family, you'll regret choosing books over blood." I did not respond. There was nothing more to say. With my broken laptop gripped to my breast and blood still pouring down my cheeks, I stepped into the dazzling sunlight of a future that had suddenly become disconnected from everything I'd labored for. The dizziness hit me strongly as I approached my car. Concussion symptoms worsened, making it difficult to focus. My phone said 11:40. No time to get to campus. There is no method to restore my files. There is no chance of extension without proof. But for the first time in my life, I had no plan, and surprisingly, no dread. I started the car and drove away from the house, which had served as both a jail and a battlefield for the previous 24 years. Whatever came next, I'd confront it without being weighed down by their toxic expectations. Blood might be thicker than water. However, it was never intended to be spilled by those who claim to love you. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, my mind clouded by agony and horror. Blood had poured through the washcloth, and the aching in my head got worse with each passing minute. Eventually, I arrived at Riverside Park, an empty public space on a weekday morning. I parked behind a shady oak tree and finally allowed myself to experience the full impact of what had occurred. The tears came quickly and violently. Great heaving sobs that appeared to come from some primordial place I'd kept hidden for years. I sobbed for the little child whose accomplishments were routinely disregarded. For the teen who secreted college acceptance letters as if they were contraband. For the PhD student whose own father ruined her work out of resentment and fear. Most of all, I sobbed for the daughter who had spent her entire life seeking acceptance from parents who were fundamentally incapable of providing it. My phone made a piercing ding, interrupting the collapse. Dr. Halverson sent an email to Elise at noon. "The deadline is coming. Please validate the submission status." Reality struck back with devastating force. The thesis. The deadline. My entire academic future is hanging in the balance. I checked the time, 11:52. With 8 minutes left, I was sitting in a park with a head injury and a damaged laptop. It appeared hopeless. Then something changed inside me. A weird calm descended, displacing panic and despair. If my family taught me anything, it was to be resilient in the face of overwhelming circumstances. I'd spent my entire life conquering their challenges. This was only one more hurdle, perhaps the most severe. First and foremost, I found a clean tissue in my glove compartment and applied it to my still bleeding temple. Then I quickly responded to Dr. Halverson. Emergency situation. I'm heading to campus right now. Please advise on the late submission protocol. The response arrived almost instantly. What type of emergency? Are you okay? I paused before deciding that honesty was the only alternative. A physical injury necessitated medical attention. Laptop was destroyed. Cannot access thesis files. I will explain in person. I started the car and drove to campus gently to compensate for my dizziness. My phone was pinging again. Dr. Halverson had said, "Go to University Health Services immediately. I'll see you there. Don't worry about your thesis right now." Her care, which differed from my family's reaction, brought tears to my eyes. I followed her directions and carefully navigated to the University Health Center. By the time I arrived, blood had soaked through the tissue and was running down my cheeks again. The receptionist took one glance at me and instantly directed me to an examination room. Gallagher, a middle-aged nurse with caring eyes and efficient hands, treated my wound while asking soft questions about what had happened. I found myself telling her the plain truth. My father smashed my laptop against my head when I tried to submit my thesis. I said the words, which sounded strange even as I spoke them. Her hands paused for a time before returning to their work. "This injury is consistent with what you're describing," she explained carefully. "I'm going to chronicle everything thoroughly. The doctor will be here momentarily to see if you need stitches, and we will need to check you for concussion." "I have a thesis deadline," I said, or had. It was noon. "Your health comes first," Gallagher stated firmly. "Academic deadlines can be extended due to medical crises. This definitely qualifies." Dr. Halverson arrived as the doctor was examining me. She took one glance at my injury, and her professional demeanor wavered somewhat. "Oh my God, Elise," she exclaimed. "What happened?" The doctor, who had just confirmed I had a slight concussion requiring 4 sutures, looked up. "Are you her professor?" Dr. Halverson nodded. "Thesis advisor." "Your student has sustained a significant head injury," he said. "Concussion protocols need to be followed. No screens, limited cognitive strain for at least 48 hours. "Of course," she replied promptly. "The deadline has been completely waived. We can negotiate extensions after she has healed." While the doctor was preparing to patch my wound, Dr. Halverson grabbed a chair beside the examination table. "Elise, the nurse claimed that your laptop was used as a weapon. Can you explain what happened?" For the second time that day, I described the circumstances leading up to my injuries. Dr. Halverson listened without interrupting, her expression becoming more concerned. After I finished, she took a long breath. "First of all, your thesis has not been lost. You sent me a draft 2 days ago, remember? We have that version at least." In the midst of the chaos, I felt a rush of relief. I had forgotten about the email. "Second," she added, "the university has protocols for circumstances like these. What occurred to you is assault, and we must report it. The university police station is right next door. Would you be willing to communicate with them once your medical treatment has concluded?" I paused. Filing a police report against my own father appeared to be a one-way ticket. However, he had already crossed an irrevocable boundary by attacking me. "Yes," I concluded, "I will report it." The next several hours were a haze of medical operations and public declarations. The doctor patched my wound while outlining concussion treatment standards. A university police officer recorded my testimony, photographed my injury, and documented the damaged laptop as proof. The student services coordinator arranged me emergency temporary accommodation in a graduate apartment complex, as returning to my parents' house was clearly not an option. Throughout it all, Dr. Halverson stood by my side, advocating for me with various university departments. She assisted me in obtaining an emergency deadline extension for my thesis submission and arranging for IT assistance to attempt data recovery from my destroyed laptop. "The graduate school dean has approved a 2-week extension given the circumstances," she told me as we sat in the student services office. "And the IT department believes they may be able to recover your files from the hard drive, which seems intact despite the external damage." "I do not know how to thank you," I murmured, overcome by her kindness. "You do not need to thank me," she said firmly. "This is what academic communities are meant to do. Assist one another. What occurred to you is outrageous, and ensuring you can do your work despite it is the bare minimum we can provide." Her remarks hit a deep chord. Support, community, concepts so different to my family's experience that they appeared practically mythological. Yet here they were, providing actual assistance when I most needed it. By late afternoon, the immediate issue was resolved. My wound was treated, a police report was filed, temporary housing was provided, and academic arrangements were made. The IT department had grabbed my laptop and promised to try data recovery overnight. I was told to relax and follow concussion protocol, which included no reading or screen time for at least 24 hours. As Dr. Halverson led me to my temporary housing, she offered a question that caught me off guard. "Elise, is this the first time your father has used physical violence against you?" "Yes," I responded angrily. "The emotional abuse has been constant, but this was the first physical attack." She nodded carefully. "I suspected as much based on your research focus. Many family psychology scholars are drawn to the field because of personal experience." Her insight was frightening yet validating. "Is it so obvious?" "Only to someone familiar with the patterns," she informed me. "Your understanding of family dynamics has always been extraordinarily nuanced for someone your age." Now I understand why. We arrived at the apartment complex, and she assisted me in settling into the plain but pleasant emergency housing unit. Before leaving, she left a business card on the counter. "This is the contact information for the University Counseling Center," she told me. "They have crisis counselors on call 24 hours a day. Please consider phoning them. What you have gone through is distressing, and processing it with expert help might be useful." After she departed, I sat on the edge of the foreign bed, drained both physically and emotionally. The day's events were bizarre and intense, like something out of a dream. My head throbbed despite the pain medicine, and my thoughts kept returning to the moment when metal and plastic collided with bone, when blood poured down my face as my mother smiled. I took up Dr. Halverson's card and the phone. Some burdens were too enormous to bear alone. The next morning, a university IT worker knocked on my door, holding a small external hard disk. "We were able to recover most of your files," he explained. "Despite the laptop's damage, the hard disk remained amazingly intact. We've transferred everything to this external drive." I accepted it with trembling hands caused by a combination of medication, tiredness, and deep relief. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." "Just doing my job," he said, smiling. "The tech department wishes you a speedy recovery." After he went, I connected the drive to the loaner laptop given by Student Services. There was my thesis, complete with the exception of the final few modifications I had made the morning of the incident. This was a miracle given what could have happened. Despite the concussion protocol's warning against screen time, I spent the next several hours finishing the final formatting and changes. My head ached, and my eyesight momentarily clouded, but resolve trumped physical discomfort. By late afternoon, I had submitted the completed thesis through the university's website. Moments later, the confirmation email arrived. The thesis had been received. Submission was recorded. Those 5 words meant victory over every impediment my family had thrown in my way. Despite their efforts to disrupt my studies, despite physical and emotional assault, property ruin and personal pain, I had succeeded. The thesis was submitted. The degree requirements would be completed. The future they said I didn't deserve remained mine to claim. As I closed the laptop, a powerful realization came over me. Instead of supporting me, the relatives who should have stood by my side attempted to ruin me. However, their hostility had molded the toughness that enabled me to overcome the harm they caused. The ultimate response to their hostility was not hatred or retribution, but accomplishment on my own terms. With that in mind, I called the university's legal office to inquire about seeking a restraining order. To remove any prospect of return, several bridges had to be burned down rather than simply crossed. My parents had made their decision. Now I was creating mine. The physical healing process began with 4 stitches above my right temple. The wound healed beautifully, leaving a little scar that would diminish but never totally disappear. In some ways, it seemed appropriate, a permanent visible reminder of the moment that severed my final link to my family of origin. The concussion symptoms lasted nearly 3 weeks. Headache, sensitivity to light, and occasional dizziness, but progressively faded as my brain healed from the blow. University Health Services followed my progress with weekly appointments, and the campus counseling facility became a fixture in my schedule, with twice-weekly sessions that helped me process not only the assault but also the years of emotional abuse that preceded it. My thesis defense was postponed by a month to allow for my rehabilitation. When the big day arrived, I stood in front of my committee with the confidence that comes from having survived the worst and still going on. The questions were hard but fair, and my solutions were clear and well-reasoned. At the end, Dr. Halverson declared what I had barely dared to hope for. Highest honors. A unanimous decision. Those remarks echoed in my thoughts as I strolled across campus later. Highest accolades. After all, I hadn't just succeeded, I had excelled. The approval was nice, but more essential was the internal knowledge that I had overcome enormous challenges. No external acknowledgement could compare to the strength I discovered within myself. The restraining order against my parents was obtained uncontested. They did not attend the court, instead issuing a brief statement through their lawyer alleging that I was always prone to hyperbole and attention-seeking conduct. The judge evaluated the medical evidence, police report, and images of my injury before ruling their answer, concerning in its dismissiveness of documented assault. The order was approved for the maximum term, with the option to extend it if needed. As spring gave way to summer, the university delivered some surprising news. The department has an opportunity for a research assistant post with a moderate pay and on-campus housing for the forthcoming academic year. Dr. Halverson suggested me. Your thesis has attracted the attention of several faculty members, she noted when we met to discuss the chance. The interplay of family dynamics, educational resilience, and first-generation student experiences is becoming more relevant to our institutional aims. We'd like you to continue and develop this research. The post would allow me to stay in the academic setting where I had found support and purpose, while also putting my independence on a stronger footing. I agreed immediately. 2 months after the assault, while I was settling into my new campus housing and research position, an unexpected visitor arrived at my office door. Andrew stood awkwardly in the corridor, appearing both defiant and uncertain. "Can we talk?" he inquired, his typical bluster noticeably lacking. I hesitated, my hand involuntarily reaching for the thin scar on my temple. "That depends on what you want to say." He flinched at the gesture. "I am not here to defend them," he replied immediately. "What Dad did was wrong. Really wrong." The admission startled me to stillness. Andrew had always been our father's echo, confirming every criticism and disdain of my decisions. "Mom and Dad told everyone you fell and hit your head on the table," he says. "But I noticed the broken laptop. I know what happened, and you are only now accepting it, 2 months later." He looked down. "I should have said something that day. Should have stopped him or aided you later." I realized the apology was implicit rather than direct, which was typical of my family's emotional constipation in communication. Nonetheless, it marked a considerable shift from our previous dynamic. "Why are you here, Andrew?" I asked directly. "I got you something," he explained, reaching inside his jacket pocket. He produced a tiny box and placed it on my desk. To replace what was broken. Inside was a brand new laptop that was far superior to the destroyed second-hand model. The gesture was both touching and insufficient, a tangible answer to a deeply rooted issue. "Thank you," I replied thoughtfully. "But a laptop does not fix what happened." "I know," he confessed. "Nothing actually solves it. Dad had crossed a line that day. Mom, too, had a reaction." He paused, appearing to struggle with his next words. "I've been thinking a lot about how they treated you compared to me, how they always made your accomplishments appear insignificant while applauding me for trivial matters. It was unfair." Andrew's recognition was seismic. He had benefited throughout his life from the unequal allocation of parental approval, recognizing it needed a level of self-reflection that I did not believe he was capable of. "No, it was not fair," I acknowledged. "But it shaped who I am. For better or worse." "Mostly better looks," he observed, looking around my university office with apparent adoration. "You made it despite them. Maybe even because of them, in some strange way." His insight startled me. Maybe he was more insightful than I gave him credit for. "Will you stay in touch?" he inquired as he prepared to depart. "Not with them. Only with me. I would like to know how you're doing." I seriously evaluated the request. Andrew had participated in the familial dynamic that resulted in violence, but he was also a product of that environment, fashioned by the same forces that had nearly destroyed me. "We can try," I said hesitantly. It was a little but substantial opening. The capacity to deliberately reconstruct family connections on my own terms gave me a new level of power. As my research position became more permanent, I started combining my personal experiences into outreach initiatives for first-generation college students from disadvantaged families. Without disclosing the exact trauma, I was able to connect with students who were suffering comparable challenges: parental rejection, a lack of support, and deliberate undermining of academic ambitions. Family resistance to your education often says more about their insecurities than your choices, I would tell these youngsters. Your pursuit of knowledge threatens the status quo, challenges their worldview, and sometimes highlights opportunities they never had, or choices they regret not making. This approach enabled many students to depersonalize their objections, viewing it as a systemic issue rather than a personal failure. The opportunity to use my unpleasant experiences to help others became the most unexpected gift of my trip. 1 year after the assault, I was invited to present my study at a national conference on educational equity. Standing at the stage in front of hundreds of educators and scholars, I felt a deep sense of validation. My father's attempt to discourage me had resulted in professional recognition, meaningful work, and a community that appreciated precisely what my family had discarded. Educational resilience is not just about academic persistence despite socioeconomic barriers, I explained during my presentation. It is also about retaining self-belief when those who should be your strongest supporters turn out to be your biggest impediments. For many first-generation students, the most significant accomplishment is not the degree itself, but the psychological stamina required to seek it in the face of deliberate discouragement from those whose praise they most crave. The subsequent standing ovation was gratifying, but the true prize came during the networking session that followed, when student after student approached me to express how my framework had helped them comprehend their own family dynamics. I had translated personal suffering into professional insight that could help others. There could be no greater victory over the story that my parents had attempted to impose. As for my parents, the distance I kept proved to be the healthiest option. Andrew's occasional updates suggested that they had not modified their stance, characterizing the assault as a misunderstanding and portraying themselves as victims of an ungrateful daughter. Their refusal to admit the truth of what transpired just proved the validity of my decision to stay away from them. The most profound realization came gradually, through both professional research and personal reflection. Their treatment of me had never been about me at all. My father's fury, my mother's enabling, and my brother's initial involvement were all the result of their own limitations, anxieties, and unrealized potential. Understanding this did not explain their actions, but it did relieve me of the burden of wondering what I could have done better to gain their acceptance. Nothing. The answer was nothing, because their condemnation was never based on my decisions or achievements. It was about how those accomplishments reflected back on them, about their own lives. My achievement became a mirror they couldn't bear to look at, so they attempted to break it instead. In breaking away, I discovered the freedom to define family on my own terms. Colleagues who helped me through a crisis, students who shared their comparable experiences, mentors who saw my potential when my parents did not. These individuals became my chosen family. Connected not by blood, but by mutual respect, shared beliefs, and genuine concern for one another's well-being. 2 years after the laptop incident, I stood in my new apartment, hanging a framed copy of my master's degree on the wall. The little scar on my temple had faded into a thin silver line that could only be seen if you knew where to look. Like so many other parts of that day, it had faded, but not vanished, blending into who I had become rather than defining me. My phone rang with a message from Dr. Halverson. The curriculum committee has approved your planned course on family dynamics and educational resilience for next semester. Congratulations, Professor Morgan. I smiled at the title, Professor Morgan. My father had declared that I didn't deserve my future, but it was now unquestionably mine. Not despite his cruelty, but because of how it shaped me. Every challenge they threw at me only increased my determination. Every dismissal had fueled my desire. The most profound lesson of my experience was not about familial trauma or intellectual perseverance, though both were important. The underlying truth was about the human ability to turn pain into purpose, to convert rejection into the gold of self-actualization. We have no control over the families we are born into, but we can choose who we become and the families we establish for ourselves. Have you ever had to deal with opposition from those who should have backed you? How did you find the confidence to pursue your dreams despite their discouragement? Thank you for listening. Take care. Good luck. Perhaps listening to today's story has prompted you to ask new questions or recalled old recollections. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments spark new tales, which connect us all. Everyone's life journey is unique, and we all try to interpret the world in our own manner. These moments serve as a reminder that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning new things. If you loved this article, please share it with your friends. Your views and feedback are always valuable to us because they inspire us to create even better material. Every tale has a distinct perspective, and our goal is to comprehend everyone's point of view in order to create diverse and relatable material. Stories like these remind us that everyone's journey through life is unique, and hearing other people's stories teaches us new things. You can also share your own experiences with us. We value your experiences as well. If you enjoyed this video, please provide feedback. We strive to generate content that always brightens your mind and inspires you with fresh thoughts. If you've seen this video before, your feedback is still valuable. Every piece of input helps us enhance our material and provide our readers with a different viewpoint. Today, what we witnessed was only a fraction of the numerous stories shared on Reddit and around the world. It's a reminder that we all try to comprehend life by sharing our experiences with one another. This film is only one example of how we use storytelling to connect with others and learn about various aspects of life. We aim to continue sharing stories that will help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and please keep a lookout for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more great material. Your sponsorship keeps us running, and we will continue to bring you thought-provoking and touching tales. Until next time, take care and remain curious.